Princess Iridessa stood at the viewport of the royal palace, her iridescent skin catching the light of 3 moons as she gazed across the crystalline spires of Lumina City. The capital of the celestial dominion had stood for 10,000 years, ruled by her bloodline since the dawn of interstellar travel. And now, they wanted to saddle her with a human. "This is absurd, Admiral Vexus," she said, her voice melodic yet sharp with annoyance. "I am a daughter of the celestial throne. My DNA contains the collective wisdom of 100 generations. I do not require protection from a species that only discovered faster-than-light travel 3 decades ago." Admiral Vexus, his scaled face impassive, bowed deeply. His ceremonial armor clinked softly with the movement. "Your Radiance, the High Council has determined that the assassination attempts have grown too sophisticated to ignore. The human comes highly recommended." "Humans," Iridessa scoffed, her bioluminescent markings flashing with contempt. "Fragile creatures with laughably short lifespans. What could one possibly offer that our elite Nebula Guard cannot?" The doors to her chambers slid open soundlessly, and Iridessa turned, expecting to see one of her attendants. Instead, a tall figure in simple black attire stood in the doorway. His skin was tan, his features sharp but symmetrical in an alien way, with eyes the color of Lumina's oceans. He carried no visible weapons, yet something about his posture suggested he didn't need them. "Your Highness," he said with a bow that was respectful but not subservient. "I'm Commander Archer Thorne, Earth Special Forces, assigned to your security detail." Iridessa circled him like a predator assessing prey. "So this is what Earth sends us. I expected at least 2 meters of muscle and armor." Archer remained perfectly still, only his eyes following her movement. "I find excessive size and equipment often creates more problems than solutions, Your Highness." "Bold words from a species still using projectile weapons a century ago," she retorted. Admiral Vexus cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Commander Thorne comes with the highest credentials. Humans have proven surprisingly effective in combat situations across the Alliance." Iridessa waved a dismissive hand, her fingers leaving trails of bioluminescent light in the air. "Fine. He can accompany me to tonight's celestial gala. Perhaps he'll provide some amusement for my court." Archer's expression remained neutral. "As you wish." The celestial gala was the highlight of Lumina's social calendar. Representatives from 50 star systems filled the grand hall, their diverse forms adorned with the rarest materials in the known galaxy. Iridessa glided through the crowds, deliberately moving quickly to test her new shadow. To her irritation, Archer kept pace effortlessly, maintaining a respectful distance while never losing sight of her. "Bored yet, Commander?" she asked over her shoulder. "I find different cultures fascinating, Your Highness," he replied smoothly. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the refreshment area. A servant, no, not a servant, had drawn some kind of energy weapon. Time seemed to slow as Iridessa registered the threat, the weapon pointing directly at her heart. In the fraction of a second it took her to process this, Archer had already moved. With stunning speed, he positioned himself between Iridessa and the attacker, simultaneously drawing and throwing something from his sleeve. The would-be assassin collapsed, a small object protruding from his neck, his weapon clattering uselessly to the floor. The entire incident had taken less than 3 seconds. As security forces swarmed the area, Archer gently but firmly guided Iridessa toward a secure exit. She found herself speechless, studying his face as they moved. There was no fear there, no panic, only calm focus. "Are you injured, Your Highness?" he asked. "No," she replied, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "How did you?" "We'll discuss it once you're secure," he interrupted, something no one had done to her in decades. For once, Princess Iridessa didn't object. The royal security chamber was a fortress within a fortress. Holographic displays showed every corner of the palace grounds while quantum scanners analyzed molecular anomalies in the air itself. Princess Iridessa paced the room, her luminescence fluctuating with her agitation. How did an assassin infiltrate the most secure event in the Dominion? She demanded. Someone with high clearance helped them, Archer replied, examining footage of the attack. The weapon signature is Vesperian, military grade. Admiral Vexus's scales darkened with concern. The Vesperians have been seeking a trade alliance for years. This could be disastrous diplomatically. Or convenient misdirection, Archer countered. The assassin's neural implants self-destructed before we could interrogate him. Iridessa stopped pacing. You knew this would happen. I knew something would happen, Archer corrected. Your security protocols are too rigid, too predictable. Effective protection requires adaptability. A human specialty, I presume. There was less venom in her voice than before. Necessity breeds innovation, Your Highness. Earth wasn't gifted with advanced technology or natural defenses. We had to earn every advantage. For the next week, Archer insisted on a complete overhaul of Iridessa's security arrangements. No more predictable schedules. No more announced appearances. The princess found herself being escorted through servant passages and maintenance tunnels, much to her dismay. This is undignified, she complained as they emerged from a hidden door into her private gardens. Dignity won't stop a plasma round, Archer replied, scanning the perimeter. Besides, don't you find it refreshing to move about without a dozen attendants recording your every move for the gossip feeds? Iridessa paused by a fountain of liquid crystal, considering his words. It is unusual. Though I'm surprised you can breathe comfortably in our atmosphere. It contains significantly more xenon than Earth's. Human adaptability again, Archer tapped a small device behind his ear. Respiratory enhancer. Though honestly, I've trained to function in environments far more hostile than this paradise. You find Lumina beautiful? Genuine curiosity colored her question. Breathtaking, he admitted. Though different from home. Something in his tone made her ask, do you miss Earth? Every day, he said simply. Before Iridessa could respond, Archer suddenly tensed. In one fluid motion, he pushed her behind the fountain and drew a sleek weapon from his boot. What, she began. Stealth drone, he whispered, pointing to a nearly invisible distortion in the air. Military grade, but the gravitational compensator is miscalibrated for Lumina's specific gravity. The distortion moved closer. Archer waited until it was within range, then fired. The drone materialized as its cloaking field failed, crashing into the garden path in a shower of sparks. Iridessa stared at the smoking remains. That's celestial technology. Our technology. Archer's expression darkened. The conspiracy goes deeper than we thought. Iridessa found herself studying his profile, struck by the intensity in his eyes. You're actually concerned for my safety, aren't you? Not just fulfilling a duty. Every life has value, Your Highness. Even spoiled alien princesses, he added with the faintest smile. For the first time in centuries, Iridessa laughed genuinely. Perhaps humans aren't entirely primitive after all. High praise indeed, Archer replied, his eyes lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary before returning to their vigilant watch. This diplomatic mission is essential, Iridessa insisted, selecting ceremonial attire from her wardrobe. The Archons of Nebula 6 have maintained neutrality for millennia. With their support, we could expose the conspiracy without triggering civil war. Archer leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. It's too exposed. The royal shuttle is fast but vulnerable. Let me arrange alternative transport. And insult the Archons with a common vessel? She raised a bioluminescent eyebrow. Sometimes security must bow to diplomacy, Commander. And sometimes stubbornness leads to unnecessary risk, he countered. Despite their disagreement, 3 hours later they were aboard the royal shuttle, gliding through the radiant nebula that gave the Archon system its name. Iridessa sat in regal silence, though she occasionally glanced at Archer, who was methodically checking every system on the shuttle. The Archons are telepathic, she said finally. They'll sense your hostility immediately. I'm not hostile, just prepared. He paused his inspection. What will they sense from you? Nobility. Purpose. She hesitated. Uncertainty. Archer stopped working. About? The future of the Dominion. These attacks are unprecedented. Some on the council whisper that my bloodline's reign has run its course. Leadership isn't about bloodlines, Archer said. It's about making difficult choices for the right reasons. An oddly philosophical perspective from a warrior, she observed. I wasn't born a warrior, Iridessa. I became one because my world needed protection. It was the first time he'd used her name without her title. The shuttle's warning system suddenly blared. Archer was at the controls instantly. 3 vessels approaching at attack velocity, he reported. The nebula was the perfect cover for an ambush. The shuttle rocked violently as the first volley hit their shields. Iridessa gripped her seat, watching in astonishment as Archer's hands flew over the controls, executing maneuvers she'd never seen performed in a diplomatic vessel. Can you pilot? He asked sharply. Yes, but... Take the controls. Keep us moving. He was already heading toward the rear compartment. Where are you going? To even the odds. Minutes later, after a series of bone-rattling evasive maneuvers, Iridessa detected a small object launching from their shuttle. One of the pursuing ships suddenly exploded, creating a chain reaction in the nebula gases that engulfed a second vessel. The shuttle's communication system crackled. Surrender the princess and your death will be quick, demanded an unseen attacker. The third vessel moved into position directly above them, a tractor beam beginning to pull them in. Iridessa fought the controls, but the shuttle's engines couldn't break free. The docking tube connected with a metallic clang. Iridessa frantically searched for a weapon as the airlock began to cycle open. Get behind me, Archer's voice came from behind her. He had returned, now wearing what appeared to be a partial exoskeleton over his limbs and chest. That's Terran combat armor, she breathed. They're illegal in 3 galaxies. Convenient, since we're currently in the 4th. He positioned himself in front of the airlock, his stance relaxed yet alert. The door slid open. 5 heavily armed attackers rushed in, wearing the insignia of the Nebula Pirates, mercenaries known for their ruthlessness. What happened next would forever change Iridessa's perception of humans. Archer moved with impossible speed, the exoskeleton amplifying his already formidable abilities. The first attacker was disarmed and unconscious before the others could even target him. The second and third fired energy weapons that Archer somehow deflected with armored forearms before closing distance and neutralizing them with precise strikes. The fourth attacker managed to graze his shoulder with a plasma blade, drawing blood. Archer didn't flinch, he grabbed the attacker's wrist, twisted until something snapped, and used the pirate's body as a shield against the fifth attacker's barrage. In less than 20 seconds, all 5 assailants were incapacitated. Archer stood among them, breathing slightly elevated but otherwise unaffected by the violence he had just unleashed. Are you hurt? He asked Iridessa, his focus immediately returning to her safety. She stared at him, seeing him truly for the first time. You're bleeding. It's nothing. He moved to the controls. I've set their ship to self-destruct after we disengage. We need to reach the Archons quickly, this attack was too well coordinated to be random pirates. As they resumed course, Iridessa found herself unable to look away from her protector, this human who had just defeated 5 elite warriors without killing a single one. Who are you really, Archer Thorne? He met her gaze steadily. Just a soldier who's seen enough death to value life, Your Highness. In that moment, something fundamental shifted between them, respect transforming into something neither of them had anticipated. The archons of Nebula 6 resembled luminous clouds more than solid beings, their telepathic voices echoing directly in the mind rather than the ear. Their floating citadel existed partially in another dimension, making it the most secure location in known space. Your minds are troubled, the Elder Archon communicated as Iridessa and Archer stood before the council. We sense danger, deception, and unexpected connection. Iridessa felt her bioluminescence brighten involuntarily. Honored Archons, I seek your wisdom. Attempts on my life threaten to destabilize the Dominion. Show us, the Archons requested in unison. Iridessa hesitated, then nodded to Archer, who presented a data crystal containing evidence they had gathered. The chamber dimmed as the crystal projected its contents. Records of communications between Admiral Vexus and unknown conspirators. Financial transactions linking royal advisors to weapons dealers. Most damning of all, plans for genetic purification of the royal bloodline. They believe my openness to other species weakens our empire, Iridessa realized aloud. This coup isn't just about power, it's about ideology. The oldest conflict in any civilization, one Archon observed. Progress versus tradition. Archer studied the evidence with a tactical eye. They'll make their final move at your coronation ceremony. Maximum symbolic impact. We cannot interfere directly, the Elder Archon stated. But we will share what we have seen in your minds. The human speaks truth about the coronation. But there is more at stake than a throne. The Archon's collective consciousness enveloped them momentarily, sharing a vision of potential futures. In most, conflict spread beyond the Dominion, engulfing neighboring systems. In some, Iridessa ruled wisely with unexpected counsel. In a few, darkness consumed everything. When the vision faded, Iridessa found herself and Archer alone in a private chamber of the Citadel. Physical accommodations for visitors were clearly an afterthought for the non-corporeal Archons, a single sleeping platform, minimal furnishings. They're giving us sanctuary for the night, Archer explained. The Citadel's dimensional phasing makes it impossible to track us here. Iridessa sank onto the platform, suddenly exhausted. My own people, Archer. My advisors, my protectors, planning to either control me or eliminate me. He sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. People fear what they don't understand. Your willingness to embrace change threatens those who profit from the status quo. Like humans joining the galactic community, she asked softly. Exactly. He smiled slightly. We were the unwelcome variable in countless equations. Iridessa studied him with new eyes. The fearsome warrior who had dispatched 5 elite mercenaries now sat calmly beside her, his expression thoughtful rather than threatening. The Archon sensed something between us, she said carefully. A connection. I noticed. Such connections are forbidden by celestial law. The royal bloodline must remain pure. Archer met her gaze steadily. The same laws being wielded by those who want you dead. You make a valid point. She moved slightly closer. In all my centuries, no one has ever spoken to me as you do. No one has challenged me, protected me without smothering me. In all my decades, he countered with a hint of humor, I've never met anyone quite like you either. Is that a compliment, Commander? An observation, Your Highness. The weight of their respective worlds seemed to press upon them in that moment, different species, different lifespans, different destinies. Yet something undeniable had formed in the crucible of danger they had endured together. We should rest, Archer said finally, breaking the tension. Tomorrow we plan our counterstrike. Iridessa nodded, though neither moved immediately. Archer, thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for helping me see beyond the walls of my palace. He simply nodded, his eyes conveying what words could not. As they prepared for the confrontation ahead, both understood that regardless of the outcome, they had each been irrevocably changed by the other. The Grand Cathedral of Lumina had witnessed the coronation of celestial monarchs for 10,000 years. Its crystal spires captured the light of the triple moons, transforming it into a cascade of color that bathed the assembled dignitaries in ethereal radiance. Iridessa stood in a preparation chamber, attendants adjusting her coronation attire, a gown woven from material that existed simultaneously as solid matter and pure energy, symbolizing the dual nature of celestial rule. Nervous? Archer asked from his position by the door, dressed in formal Dominion military attire that had been modified to accommodate his human physiology. Celestials don't get nervous, she replied with a smile that contradicted her words. Their plan was precarious but necessary. Iridessa would proceed with the coronation as expected, drawing out the conspirators. Archer and a small team of personally vetted guards would monitor for the inevitable attempt. The Archons had provided one critical piece of intelligence: Admiral Vexus was merely a figurehead. The true architect of the conspiracy remained hidden. Remember, Archer said as attendants made final adjustments, no unnecessary risks. Your safety is paramount. My duty to my people is paramount, she corrected. Some things are worth risking everything for. The way he looked at her then conveyed a depth of understanding that transcended words. They had each recognized something in the other, a shared sense of purpose, of responsibility that went beyond personal desire. The ceremonial horn sounded, signaling the beginning of the procession. With a final nod to Archer, Iridessa stepped into the grand hall, her luminescence adjusted to its most impressive display. The ceremony proceeded according to ancient tradition. Representatives from 50 star systems presented their tributes. The High Priestess recited the Celestial Covenant. Through it all, Iridessa maintained perfect composure while her eyes constantly scanned for threats. The crucial moment approached, the investiture of power, when the crown of stars would be placed upon her head. This would be the logical moment for the conspirators to strike. As the High Priestess lifted the crown, Iridessa sensed rather than saw the shift in the atmosphere. A barely perceptible shimmer near the vaulted ceiling, stealth technology activating. She locked eyes with Archer across the hall. He had seen it too. The next moments unfolded in controlled chaos. As assassins materialized on multiple levels of the cathedral, Archer and his team moved with practiced precision. Energy weapons discharged, harmlessly absorbed by previously installed dampening fields. Iridessa didn't flee as the conspirators had expected. Instead, she stepped forward, addressing the assembled dignitaries even as combat erupted around the periphery. Witnesses of the Dominion, her voice carried with royal authority, behold the face of treason. On her command, hidden projectors activated, displaying the evidence gathered against the conspirators. Communications. Financial transactions. Plans for genetic purification. Amid the gasps of shock, Admiral Vexus made his move, drawing a concealed weapon. But before he could aim, Archer neutralized him with a precision strike that left the Admiral unconscious at the foot of the dais. The puppet, but not the master, Iridessa declared, her gaze sweeping the crowd. Step forward, Chancellor Orion. The Chancellor, her most trusted advisor since childhood, froze momentarily before composing his features into a mask of innocence. This is absurd, Your Highness. I have served the throne loyally for 5 centuries, she finished. Long enough to believe you should control it rather than merely serve it. As royal guards moved to surround him, Orion revealed his final gambit, a quantum destabilizer capable of collapsing the cathedral's molecular structure. The Dominion requires purity, he snarled. Your fascination with lesser species, especially humans, makes you unfit to rule. He activated the device. Panic erupted as energy began pulsing outward. Archer sprinted toward the Chancellor, but the distance was too great. It was Iridessa who reached Orion first. Using the combat techniques Archer had taught her, she disarmed the Chancellor with a precise strike. As he stumbled backward in shock, she caught the destabilizer. Archer, she called, tossing the device to him. With seconds remaining, Archer extracted the power core and contained the energy pulse within a field generator from his combat equipment. The threatening glow subsided. In the silence that followed, Iridessa stood tall before her people. The strength of the Dominion lies not in isolation but in adaptation. Not in purity, but in diversity of thought and form. This is the future I envision, and any who cannot accept this have no place in our civilization. The coronation resumed with a new solemnity. When the crown of stars was placed upon her head, Queen Iridessa of the Celestial Dominion made an unprecedented announcement. As my first royal decree, I established the position of interspecies ambassador to the Earth Alliance. Her eyes found Archer's. Commander Thorne, will you accept this honor? The significance was lost on none present. This was not merely a diplomatic posting but an elevation of status that acknowledged the value of human perspective in celestial affairs. Archer approached the throne and knelt. I would be honored, Your Majesty. As tradition dictated, she extended her hand for the ceremonial kiss of fealty. What wasn't traditional was the way her fingers lingered against his, or the unspoken promise that passed between them. Later, in the privacy of the royal chambers, protocol temporarily set aside, Iridessa and Archer stood on her balcony overlooking Illumina transformed by the day's events. Ambassador Thorne, she said with a smile. A position that will require frequent royal consultation. Very frequent, he agreed, standing closer than propriety would normally allow. Your ancestors might not approve. My ancestors didn't face the challenges we do. She turned to face him fully. The stars are changing, Archer. Old boundaries are dissolving. Perhaps it's time for new traditions. Careful, Your Majesty, he said softly. That sounds dangerously like progress. With the right protection, she replied, her luminescence brightening as their hands found each other's, I'm willing to take that risk. Above them, the three moons of Lumina aligned in a rare celestial event, bathing the world in unified light, a fitting symbol for the unprecedented alliance forming between two very different beings from worlds apart.